to start, do you remember how we met?
Well, my version of remembering how we met is probably at M Theory Records
Correct.
in San Diego for
Mm-hmm.
it was an in store for Rhett Miller,
Mm-hmm.
and we ended up talking because of either a Redd Kross or Jellyfish connection.
Yeah, I said the words Red Cross and you overheard it. And
Okay,
you're like, who are you, basically?
right,
Which I
yeah,
love
yeah,
because
it's
I'm the
really
same
funny.
way when I hear people talking about bands I know or like or whatever.
Yeah,
And it turned out that we had, friends in common. You lived around the corner from Roger and Charlotte, maybe at the time, or I don't know if you were living in Georgia then.
yeah. I had probably been in Georgia for a couple of years. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And so you were tour managing Rhett Miller solo, who's this singer from Old 97s.
yeah.
And you've basically been tour managing for, oh my gosh, 30 or 40 years now, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of sad in a way. I used to make I used to make fun of my dad. You know, he rest his soul. You know, he lived a an honest life, but he parked in the same parking lot and walked into the same building for 38 years.
Uh huh.
And I was thinking, man, the dude should have had some options. You know, he was a brilliant guy,
Mm-hmm.
and like I think just changing companies once would have been a good idea, you know. But he passed away with the gold watch and all the
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and people from his company were coming by, and I was just waiting for somebody from his company to tell me that he had the longest tenure of any person at that company ever. And I think about it
Mm-hmm.
now, and it's like I've been independent, so I haven't had the same employer per se, unless you call being an independent contractor an employer. But I've been at this career since 1987.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I made enough money to pay rent by being on tour with the band was 1987.
Okay.
Yeah.
And uh, that would have been with Red Cross?
Yeah, that was the Redd Kross Neurotica tour. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me how things got there. I guess I should start with my favorite question, which is what was the first concert that you ever went to?
Right. Um, I always qualify it probably first by saying it was a festival. So some people wonder if festival counts for full blown thing, but
I
so
love rules. I'm
right,
listening.
right. So it was a festival with at least 10 bands a day over the weekend, and I went
Okay.
on day two, and the headliner was Aerosmith, with the sub headliner being the co headliner being Van Halen.
Wow.
Yeah, the opening act was Head East, and we saw Head East by getting there an hour early. So not only did we wait in line with all the crazies of downtown LA in 1978, but we got let in at doors, sat on the football field for an hour. Then we saw Head East, who we had no idea who they were, why they were playing. Then we saw April Wine, also no idea why they were there. Then we
Mm-hmm.
saw like a little intro from Cheech and Chong, I think,
Wow.
and
Okay.
and then they brought on the Boomtown Rats.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
and
you told me this. I'm jealous.
yeah, and the Boomtown Rats were phenomenal, and it's weird because we had no idea who they were. They didn't play a single song that even the audience recognized, but Bob Geldof was so charismatic and at the same
Mm-hmm.
time so angry at the audience for
Mm-hmm.
playing with a beach ball. They were playing with a beach ball and frisbees and smoking weed, and he was yelling at us that he didn't fly all the way across the ocean to watch people play with a beach ball. And we're just staring up like, you're doing great, man. Just keep going. Van Halen's gonna be on soon, and then so we made it through that, and that was really fun. And then we got to see Eddie Money, and Eddie Money was really good. And of course, he had two hits that everybody recognized, so that was like magic to see someone sing a hit.
Uh-huh.
And then after Eddie Money
How old were you, do you think?
I was 11,
Okay.
and then after Eddie Money was UFO, and
Wow.
yeah, and UFO was mind blowing. They were just heavy, just mind blowing, heavy rock. And then my friend's mother got a headache and she was feeling sick. And she had also been on her feet at this fucking festival for 10 hours already. And
Mhm.
she said, "Hey, I'll buy you guys McDonald's and you can get shakes if you let me leave. I just can't handle it anymore." And we're like, "But Van Halen's about to go on." She's like, "Please." And we're like, "Okay." So we left right as Van Halen was taking the stage.
Oh man, that
So,
shake must have been amazing.
there was no way. There was no way to like really give her enough grief for her to turn back. And at the
Hmm.
same time, um, I had probably never been that tired in my life. You know,
Hmm.
like to this day. I mean, I do festivals because it's part of my job, but after I'm done with whatever my part of the day is, I check in with all my band members and I say, "Hey, I'm going to go to the hotel and sleep. Are you guys
Hmm.
cool?" And half of them will follow me to the hotel and sleep. Like
Hmm.
the idea of being on your feet all day to watch bands play, I can't imagine that you can still sell that idea to people. Like it's just crazy. I mean, when I was 11, I remember being completely gassed by the time Van Halen hit the stage, and
Hmm.
and we were mad that we couldn't see him, but at the same time, we understood what that woman was going through.
Right, right. So you're 11, and are you already pretty music obsessed as a kid? And did you, by going to that show, did you have rock star dreams, or were you like always sort of interested in the behind the scenes and thinking maybe that's something you wanted to do?
It's really interesting that I don't frequently put the two and two together about that show,
Hmm.
but the kid that I was with at that show, his living room was the first place that I ever heard Kiss alive. And
Okay.
his sister's record collection is the one that we used to raid to hear the cool records.
Hmm.
And his couch was the stage that we used when we did our fake Kiss concerts.
Uh-huh.
And
As you
his
do.
yeah, and his tennis rackets, his sister and mom's tennis rackets were the guitars.
Nice.
So we had aspirations of like rocking out,
Hmm.
and we knew that music was fun, um, and we knew that it was exciting, and we knew that it was something bombastic. Like to us, you could totally equate a rock concert with Evil Knievel. Like
Hmm.
it was kind of the same thing. We didn't have a way to see Evil Knievel yet, so the rock concert was like, yeah, let's do that. So
Hmm.
the obsession was building then, and I would have to look at the record to get the dates straight. But like between Aerosmith Live bootleg and Kiss Alive, I could put on a set of headphones and actually kind of teleport to a concert and have everything, the visuals, everything would just be all. It would be 100% full body experience being at a rock concert just by listening to those records with headphones on.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think there was something about it that I knew I needed to be there, but I didn't really. I didn't really. I had no idea how music was made, like how
Hmm.
what Joe Perry was doing with his guitar and reading the credits, seeing that he played slide guitar. Like, well, I don't know what a slide guitar is, but I like what it sounds.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, I didn't know anything.
Did you did you start playing, because I know you play guitar. Did
Yeah,
you end up playing in bands before you ever helped a band in any kind of like
yeah,
roadie kind of capacity, or
yeah. Well, that's another one of those interesting coincidences. Is that the age of 11 was when I went to that concert, and the age of 12 was when I got a Les Paul copy for my birthday.
nice.
And it was a long, arduous process to learn even to play a bar chord. Like
Hmm.
we didn't have anybody who understood how the guitar worked. We had an accordion in my house,
Same thing.
and and so it's like, well, we can get you an accordion lesson, but we don't we
Uh-huh.
don't know what to do with this fucking guitar. So it's
Is
kind of
that what happens in German households? We've got an accordion.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
It's like taking a child to accordion lessons is one of those dreaded things. It's
Got
like
it.
when you hear about the kids from any given culture with a studious nature, and they say, oh well, she had to learn violin by the time she could walk, or
Mm.
I had piano lessons 3 times a week and I wasn't allowed to go play soccer. Well, our house was very limited in sports, but we had accordion,
Nice.
and my sisters could pretty much jam on it. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and I didn't know what music was for rock and roll. The reason that living room across the street was the place that I discovered Kiss was because my house didn't have rock records. My house had weird German folk music and
Mm-hmm.
German hit parade. Like the German hit
Mm-hmm.
parade music was really weird. Like you could listen to German hit parade stuff from the '70s, and it's comical. It's like comically bad.
We know of this. We
Yeah,
know of
yeah,
this.
yeah.
So you ended up was if I remember right, Redd Kross was the first band that you ever did help as far as like they needed someone to help them on a road trip, or how did
Right.
that happen? I refresh my memory.
We had a long, we had this long tradition of me calling them before a show and then finding a way to meet them behind the building and getting me in when I was underaged.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that would be like, okay, we're going to bring my dad's pickup truck down. So just meet us at the pickup truck and you could carry in an amp. And once you're in there with that, then you just sit there and then you're in for the night.
And
And
you knew them from high school? Is that
I knew them from school orchestra. I actually played a snare drum in the school orchestra.
okay?
And Steve played bass, which is kind of obvious, but like
Mm-hmm.
he played bass, I played snare drum. And then 7th grade, when I got that guitar, uh, I had to move and switch schools at the end of 7th grade. And then, strangely enough, 8th grade is when Steve went missing for a while, and we had a little bit of a disconnect there because I had to switch schools, and Steve was a missing person for quite a while.
Right.
And then once he got back, and they did Born Innocent, I was in 9th grade, maybe 10th, but probably ninth. And then they actually delivered copies of Born Innocent to my high school because I went to school with the cover model uh, for that album. The original
Okay.
the original cover art has a girl named Stephanie Cote on it, and she was a classmate of mine.
Okay.
And she said, "Hey, look, the album came out. I just got it." And Steve and
No
Jeff
way.
had delivered it up to the school. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
So
Yeah. So all that time, from '84 on, from '84 on, it would be that if Redd Kross had played a show that I could get wind of, like if I heard about it here or saw a flyer or somebody told me about it, then I would call them and like meet them outside, and I would help carry an amp in, and then that would be my ticket to the show.
mm-hmm.
And there was a few other
and,
people that did that.
but eventually it became something a little more official when they started actually touring.
Right. So when they made Neurotica, they had been given a little bit of tour support, I think, by the record label, which was a little bit of extra money for them to tour with. And I talked to Steve about what their first tour was like, and he had described it to me, and I just thought, what, that sounds like heaven. How on earth that I would never get tired of that. He said, well, if you say yes to going, you're going to be gone for 6 weeks, and once we leave California, like, we're gone. And he said, you need, like, you got to be like the road dog. And I said, oh man, once I'm in the van, we're done. I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
And so between being a competent van driver and knowing how to restring guitars and fix things that had broken and set up drum kits, and I could change heads or fix a kick drum pedal or anything like that, was something that came naturally to me because I was a tinkerer.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was actually, strangely enough, he did have the ultimate set of tools, so I could solder things. Yeah, so I could solder things in my garage when I needed to. And so yeah, it was this really weird feeling, like this feeling of like crossing the state line and going to a gig in Phoenix and knowing California was behind me, to me that was just like, it was this perfect thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a
Adventure.
it was like a skier looking down a slope and seeing nothing but untracked powder. You know, that's what it was
Mm-hmm.
like for me. I was just like, oh fuck yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I do not have to go home for a while, and that was,
Mm-hmm.
and I had that mentality for a really long time, and then way after that was when it started to seem a little bit like a job, but
Mm.
for years it was just like going out, meeting people, hearing music, having fun, trying new food. Um, Once I was 21, it turned into a thing of like, you know, your life was basically like going to a gig and hanging out at a bar and then going to sleep for a few hours and doing the same thing the next day,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of a dreamlike state for somebody,
Right.
you know. Yeah, that's
So
how that
you
was.
were, that was your main gig for from starting in what 80? You said 87 was when you
Yeah, you know,
made your living up until like
from 80,
93 or.
yeah, 87, 87 through 91 was pretty steady. And then
Mm-hmm.
um, they had some hiatus periods for recording and regrouping and what have you that would happen from time to time. And I would fill in the gaps with working for other bands because the agent that booked them had a bunch of really good bands. And then their manager after that had started managing a bunch of other bands as well.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest, the biggest connection that was the game changer in that whole 1987 period. The biggest connection was that we opened for Sonic Youth on the sister tour,
Mm-hmm.
and during the sister tour, um, Jeff had told Sonic Youth that their manager John Silva was a cool guy and that they should think about going with John if they needed to get rid of somebody, because Sonic Youth was in a situation where their most popular record was out on SST, and SST just had no way of telling them how many records they had sold or if they were going to get any money from it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were kind of in this situation like, yeah, we've just kind of never made money unless we went to Europe and went on tour. So we need somebody who could help us fill in the blanks. And they said, oh, you know, maybe John could help you with that. And from that point on, uh, the referrals from Sonic Youth to John to Sonic Youth's agent, Bob Lawton, uh, people just started calling me during my time off from Redd Kross and saying, "Hey, I've got another band that could use you."
Mm-hmm.
And it it started taking up so much of my time that I kind of stopped going back. I used to go back to college between tours, and then I eventually stopped doing that and kept just getting too many tours to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And there it went.
Uh-huh. So uh, around this time, so I guess fast forward, you ended up after I met you. I'm going way forward.
Yeah, yeah,
After I met you, you ended up actually moving in with our mutual friend Charlotte,
yeah,
and then I ended up dating her, and then I ended up moving in with her. So during the pandemic, we were buddies, and I got to hear Road Tales, which was fine with me,
yeah,
as over coffee while the world shut down.
yeah.
And after a while, at some point, I realized, okay, you must run out of bands that I haven't heard about that you've toured with.
Right,
So I knew that you had done Redd Kross, and I knew you had done Old 97s was your kind of longest gigs.
right, right.
So I knew those two. And after all these random stories that I'd been hearing, because I thought you're not going to be able to pull out any more. Did I mention that I was in the November Rain video? No. Did I mention that I went to a high school dance with Gwen Stefani? No. Did I mention? And it was just like, okay, look, we're going to sit you down, and I want to hear every band that you ever
Right. Oh
road
shit.
managed.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you started in, and easily the one that I was most not impressed, but just like jealous and wish I had gone was the Laws. They're like
Right.
one of my favorite. They made one of my favorite records ever, and for whatever reason, and I was just looking up dates. I didn't see them on their one U.S. tour. So in the night, you said around 1991, with all that stuff happening, you started getting referrals. Is that how you ended up doing that tour?
Right. So that's amazing. Yes. So I mentioned him a minute ago, named a man named Bob Lawton. He was an amazing guy, and he lived in New York, and he ran a little agency that booked hardly anyone, but his big client was Sonic Youth. He
Mm-hmm.
actually had this niche of like uber hipster New York stuff. So like the bands that broke out from his stable that got popular were like um Sonic Youth, Yo La Tango, and Superchunk.
Okay.
But he really liked New Zealand bands and Australian bands.
Mm-hmm.
So he picked up this band out of New Zealand called Straightjacket Fits.
Yes, which
And
I can't wait to talk about too.
right. So he called me up and goes, "Hey, I got this band Straightjacket Fits and they're opening for the Laws. They're starting their tour in California. And I just need you to take care of them. Like they're bringing this chick from New Zealand that manages them and she wants to be in charge, but you just kind of need to make sure that they don't like drive their van into a ditch. And, you know, you just need to take care of them the way you do with Redd Kross." I said, "Yeah, okay." And so I met up with Straightjacket Fits.
Had you ever heard of them?
I had never heard of them.
Okay.
And for the life of me, I could not understand why a band would exist for more than 2 weeks with that name. I and and I would always bug them because I liked really stupid things, and I like trying to make somebody uncomfortable to the point that they need to ask me if I'm an idiot. Like I kind of want to push them just to look at me and go, "Are you high or are you trying to make me laugh?" Because I told
Yes,
him,
to both.
I said, "Yeah, the Straightjacket Fits." I said, "That's an odd name. You should lengthen it a little bit and call it the straight jacket that fits really well." And you know, I was trying to figure like, anyway, but why do you have that name? I felt really bad for him because that name was the like from the get go. They had an uphill battle because the name was such a stumbling block. I don't even think people put the CD into their CD player.
I
But
did,
good.
but
It was
I was one of the precious few in America, probably. So
yeah,
yeah, that's the other part of this tour that I can't believe that two of my favorite bands at the time toured together, and I
yeah,
somehow managed to
yeah,
miss it.
yeah. It was really fun. But anyway, yeah. So if I believe my memory, we probably were at that show that's on YouTube in San Diego. That we might have
Mm-hmm.
started in San Diego, and
Mm-hmm.
so Straight Jacket Fits would play a 30 or 45 minute set, and then
Mm-hmm.
they would break, and then the Laws would go on, and the Laws would play like a 45 minute set and walk off and come back on, and I think they would play There She Goes for a second time
Wow.
because they were so limited in material. But that tour, we were kind of all on top of each other all the time because we were playing smaller venues, and both bands had relatively small crews.
Mm-hmm.
So I was getting recruited by Straightjacket by the Laws for certain things, and then we were using the Laws sound guy for other stuff. And so, as it turned out, that sound guy ended up hiring me later, and we worked together on other things. And then when the
Mm-hmm.
Laws tour finished, they got my phone number, and when they returned to the States for a couple one-offs with Elvis Costello,
Which I just saw. Yes.
yeah, I was on those
Mm-hmm.
working directly for the Laws. But
Mm-hmm.
at that time for the Straight Jacket Fits tour, I was in the van with Straight Jacket Fits, and then I was only doing stuff for the Laws, you know, by request. I wasn't their
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't their employee at that time, not on those
Mm-hmm.
shows. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Did
yeah.
you get to, because the one thing that I read in looking around about them a couple weeks ago when we first decided to do an episode on them was that well, I've read endlessly about how they were unhappy with their record, and every interview was about how horrible their record is and the record, yeah, yeah, yeah. And but one thing I read that I was like, oh, I know someone who might have firsthand knowledge of this is that they, as like in protest because they were so unhappy, Lee would he didn't shower, he didn't bathe for like the entire tour. Does that somehow seem possible, plausible remembrance?
Right. So here's the weird thing is that I was trying to remember if I could come up with anything where I could say that I had directly engaged with Lee, where
Mm-hmm.
I could say that we had a conversation and I got to know him this much, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing, a tour bus can be as isolated as a submarine. And you could eventually get the idea that you could do whatever you want all the time as long as you're off the bus long enough to play a show.
Mm-hmm.
And so, from what I remember, was that Lee would walk out of the bus from a cloud of smoke and look like he just got out of bed no matter what time it was. And that would usually be 5 or 6 in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And he would be wearing the same sweatpants and soccer jersey that he had had the whole time. And I don't really know if it was like a Liverpool jersey or just some generic Adidas soccer jersey that he wore, but he
Mm-hmm.
wore Adidas sweatpants, like soccer warm ups, and kind of like shower sandals, and this soccer jersey the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have any record of him showering per se.
Uh-huh.
And I do know that there was a certain amount of smell like that. Yeah, oh well, that dude needs a shower, and I don't think that didn't really change much. But to me, it was like he was such a bizarre cat, and there's a handful of people that are openly hostile and unpleasant to others that will make sure I don't make friends with them. There are those people. I've done tours like that where the headliner never says a word to the opening band. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't Lee's vibe. Lee's vibe was just like that he was so nutty, you just weren't going to get to know him.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you were going to say something, he might answer you back in a way that was so surprising, you just be like, wow, I didn't expect that.
Okay.
Like kind of a nut, basically a nut.
Mm-hmm.
And then I heard a thing on the San Diego board tape, which is so funny. Um, if you're a monitor engineer or if you're a guitar player using an acoustic guitar with a little monitor in front of you, there's certain
Mm-hmm.
notes that you could play that will make the guitar resonate in a totally insane way. And
Mm-hmm.
it is feedback in a way, but it's resonant in the guitar. So most of the sound is the wood vibrating.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's a little
like
bit of a buzz.
yeah. So the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of I Feel Fine by the Beatles, you'll hear a guitar doing that. And then
Mm-hmm.
you'll hear bum ba da ba dum ba dum. Well, Lee would always get the guitar really loud to where he knew that that note was going to take off,
Mm-hmm.
and he knew it. And the guy who did monitors was my friend Brian. And he would look at Brian like, I'm going to fucking kill you. And he would just take his finger and go like this and rev up the string so the whole guitar would do that. And he would look at
Mm-hmm.
Brian like, oh, this wouldn't happen if I didn't have such a shitty monitor, man. But the truth is there's a resonant frequency in the guitar and it's gonna do that. It will
Uh-huh.
just do that if you're loud enough. So
Yeah.
Lee would do that to torture Brian. And so
Mm.
when I heard that noise on the board tape, I'm just like, oh, that's that
Memories.
fucking thing. Yeah, and it was cracking me up. And
Uh-huh.
in terms of him speaking of the album and being crazy, was that he had this really hilarious accent that if I tried to do it, I would do it so poorly people would just slam me for it.
Yeah. No, I know what you're talking about.
But so to quote him as closely as possible, I would start by telling you that if I ever hear my voice on a recording play back to me, I just go, my God, I have the most uniquely weird voice on earth. It fucking sucks. Man, I would do anything to have a fucking men's voice. What's wrong with this? What's wrong
Mm-hmm.
with me? And
Uh-huh.
it's just simply because I'm used to the sound of the bones vibrating in my head,
Right.
and I'm not used to what it sounds like to everyone else.
Right.
So that's my cross to bear. But it's also everyone else's cross to bear with their own voice.
Uh-huh.
So
True.
uh, I would hear Lee almost verbatim on a daily basis with journalists
Mm-hmm.
going, well, still, Steve Lillywhite came in to record that record, and I played the songs and I sang them, but I came back and I heard it when he was done with it, and that's not me. I've heard that fucking record, and I won't listen to it anymore. That's not me. I don't know who the fuck's on that record.
Hmm.
That's not us. We made another version of that record that's better. The one that Steve Lillywhite made. I don't know who's on that.
Mm-hmm.
And he would say that over and over and over again. And he would say, "Go ahead, play it, play it. It doesn't sound like me. That's not me." And then I would just be scratching my head. And then he would yell at my friend Brian because he'd said the monitors didn't sound like him
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. And then I listened to that album today, and I listened to it a couple times last week, and I realized that the thing that Steve Lillywhite would have done, and that a lot of producers did then, was that they separated everything so neatly and they cleaned everything up so nicely, and then they would mix it to their own taste, and you would hear the finished product as the producer wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I listen to that actual record, it sounds exactly like the Laws did live every night, just
Mm-hmm.
cleaned up.
Yeah. Not
A,
not at concert volume with your ears buzzing.
yeah, it's just
And
a
I
little.
think I wonder if that's what it was. And it's so funny that you mention the monitor and him and the way he would play his acoustic guitar, because I was trying to think of who else played acoustic guitar that rhythmically in a way that wasn't just strumming.
Yeah,
You know, like it's so distinctive, and I never really thought about it that much until listening to this record, like with a little bit of a critical ear for this. I'm like, who else does that? I don't know. Like there's like solo folky guys, but in a rock band, there's
yeah.
usually not somebody playing like riffs, and it sounds so cool and almost like a lead, but not like.
No, he
And
was. Yeah, yeah. No, he was a complete tactician with that guitar. And when he
mm-hmm,
wasn't playing that, he was playing a little Telecaster through a PVPA head that he had bought at a pawn shop in England. And
random.
yeah, and uh, the whole time I saw them from day one till day 60, it never ever stopped reminding me of the Who doing
Mm,
Can't Explain. I figured, like, if you took a bunch of young guys and you taught them to play Can't Explain, and they had to base everything from learning that song, that you could have ended up with something like The Laws, except for
mm-hmm,
when I look at the age gap between the two bands and the time lapse between the two. Like, I saw The Laws every day being excellent only 20 years after the Who had hit their peak. And now I think
right.
20 years is a relatively short amount of time,
Yeah,
you know?
strangely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're,
You and I have had the discussion so many times that how much things in the world changed in those 20 years is crazy. And then
yeah.
it kind of just stopped changing around the year 2000. But
Yeah.
now I totally hear you. Was his brother on drums?
Yeah. His name was Neil.
Okay, because that's another thing that I've gone down the wormhole of looking at law stuff so many times over the years, and I'll forget completely. But I saw some video, and maybe he's playing on most of the videos of them playing live around then. He is so interesting to watch. Like unlike any drummer I've ever seen. Maybe like
Right.
his playing style is so unorthodox and weird. I'm like, what am I watching? It just doesn't look like it should even fit. But he was so good.
Yeah. And he had this vintage, it was probably Ludwig, but I can't say that I remember the brand, but it was like this vintage Ludwig kick drum that was a little too tall and a little too narrow to look right on a drum kit.
Mm-hmm.
And then it had the Laws written in a really crude manner on the front.
Mm-hmm.
And then the way the drum hardware was and the rest of the kit was, it really looked like this piecemeal antique shop drum kit that had been thrown together. And the fact
Mm-hmm.
that they made it work every night, and that their sound was all coming out of really haphazard piecemeal stuff that you didn't expect to see.
Mm-hmm.
And like, um, one of the weird things about their position in pop music for those days and how they were kind of cut short was that the things that were coming up in those days were like Nirvana and Dinosaur Jr. and like it was much more likely that that band uh, on stage in San Diego that night would have been playing Marshalls with Fender guitars and being turned up to 10 and fuzz pedals. But like you look
Mm-hmm.
at the Laws on that stage, the guy that played all the leads was the lead singer, and he didn't have a fuzz pedal.
Mm-hmm.
And their drummer played this weird kit that looked like it came out of an antique store.
Mm-hmm.
And everything they did sounded like 1964, 1965, The Who, you know. And then they had
Right.
that thing of like the Who being famously loud and abrasive. If you listen to early Who records, they sound like they're doing a pretty good job of being clean. But
Yeah.
live is when it would have been making the difference. And I feel like that's
Mm-hmm.
every time I saw the Laws, I was just like, this is like a young version of the Who, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So were you guys traveling separately, or was it all both bands on one bus, or did you drive, or what was
We
the
had
deal?
a rented van. My band was in a Dodge Tradesman that we had rented from an airport somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and then we had the Laws on a bus, and then we had a monitor system and all the band's gear, both bands in a Ryder truck. And the Ryder truck was driven by Brian, the monitor man.
Mm-hmm.
And on long drives, I would get out of my van and into Brian's truck, and we would team drive the
Mm-hmm.
backline truck. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I assume that like when you started the tour, you had heard "There She Goes." Maybe it was a hit enough for them to come over and play America. I'm guessing. Did you maybe you'd heard of them? Maybe you hadn't heard of them. I don't.
Yeah, so it had been breaking through on K Rock just enough to when I heard him, like, oh yeah, there's that big song, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the weird thing about the tour bus and the submarine life and Lee living in a cloud of smoke and being crazy was that I think he already knew that he had a hit. And that in the UK, the press had already run him through the ringer to be a star. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
what we never knew in America in those days, before I started traveling a lot and before the internet could give you statistics so easily, was that in England, the entire scene for people to become famous at our kind of music was dependent on two magazines and a couple of publicists that had connections to those magazines.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had a song worth listening to for 5 minutes, a publicist in London could make you famous for a week.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you were a good enough band to play for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, then you have a shot at being a superstar. But if you have two songs that you wrote yourself with a hummable melody, somebody in the melody maker would have said you were the next Beatles,
Right.
and you would be selling out the biggest venues in England. And it would only
Mm-hmm.
take a short period of time,
Yeah.
a
Crazy.
really short period of time. So the Laws, their heads had already been blown up to
Mm-hmm.
where they were the next Beatles. They were the heroes of Liverpool. They were going to pick up the flag of Liverpool and plant it in the States, and it was going to be Beatlemania all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And the leader of the pack was going to be Lee, this fucking lunatic from Liverpool.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just looking at it going, I don't know, man, that's crazy. But it didn't compute with me because I was spending my time in either a 15 passenger van or a Ryder truck and setting up the stage, tearing it down, loading the gear, dealing with a Scottish crew guy who was hilarious. Um, Nothing seemed rock starish at all.
Hmm.
Like the idea that there was a rock star in our midst wasn't even a thing.
Hmm. I,
It,
I I might have mentioned some on another episode, but there was a guy at the Casbah that I was asking one night, like who's the worst band that you ever dealt with? And he said, in general, British bands that are huge there and come here and have to play the Casbah, which you've been to many
Yeah.
times, is always the worst. Always. Was that kind of your first dealing with a British band that's like
It,
popular elsewhere?
well, we had been through what you would call the British thing, because that Casbah guy was talking about the British thing. And we had seen the British thing with Redd Kross because Zodiac Mind Warp had a tour that was,
Wow.
yeah, they had a tour that was just dying. Their tour was dying, and they were big in the UK. And the promoter in Santa Clara, to cover his ass, told Zodiac Mind Warp, if you don't want to have a straight up cancellation, we can move your show to one step beyond, and you can play right before Redd Kross. They've sold tickets. And Zodiac Mind Warp were like, yeah, whatever. And of course, their tour manager and their agent didn't really tell them exactly what had happened. But their show had been canceled, and they had been turned into an opener for Redd Kross. And to see these British guys with a tour bus and a gold record in the UK opening for Redd Kross, and to deal with the bitterness that they were casting forth, it was so hilarious. And then our tour manager we had at the time had some experience, and he bragged about what he said to them. I can't prove that he said it, but he said to them, according to dinner that night, he said, boy, you guys have a lot of attitude for a support band. And yeah, so I kind of knew about the British thing when that happened with the laws. And it's just weird because I've had to deal with artists now, I still do, that want to know what being a rock star means, and when do you get there, when do you get the trophy, does somebody come and give you a crown, how does it work? And it's like, the rock star is 100% created by the audience. So if the audience doesn't know who you are and hang on your every word, you're still not a star. Like, a great example that people would look for different ways to prove me wrong, I can tell you for a fact, there is a man who inherited the fortune of the Westfield shopping mall empire. They own real estate all over the world. They are one of the biggest real estate holding companies on earth, Westfield shopping malls. They're Australian.
Oh, Westfield. I thought you said West Hills. Okay,
no,
good.
Westfield. And one of the guys who inherited that fortune, his favorite thing is to play in a rock band. So he has a booking agent that gets him festival slots. And then he has a cover band staffed by professional players from other big bands that have the freedom to play other shows. So he'll take all the hired guns from Guns N' Roses and people from Alice Cooper's band, and they'll use a private jet that he's paid for, and they'll go play festivals. And this guy will be playing rhythm guitar and probably not even really be in the mix, but he just wants to be on stage, right? Everybody who watched him play has no idea why they're watching this band. And the guy who's worth like over $1 billion standing there playing like $100,000 guitar, he's virtually unrecognizable. But he's on that stage going, yeah, man, this is fucking rock. He's a billionaire. He's in a private jet. He's playing on a stage with thousands of people in front of him, but he's not a rock star. The closest thing to a rock star he's got on that stage is a session player who replaced Izzy Stradlin in Guns N' Roses. We can look up who's been in that band. And it's fine. But it's like, how would he graduate from being just a billionaire with a Les Paul around his neck to being a rock star? Well, the difference would be is that if he had a big hit song, and when he walked on that stage, if the people were chanting his name,
Mm-hmm.
then he'd be a rock star. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right, right.
It's like when one time somebody was trying to figure out what the name was of the bass player of Journey. And when somebody
Uh,
shouted out what the guy's name really was,
Avery?
everybody started
Wavery?
laughing. That guy was the answer to that particular question at the time was Ross Valerie.
Thank you.
And
I had
we
several letters, right?
right, and we thought, okay, so you got Steve Perry, fucking all-time rock star. Then you got Neil Sean, who's desperately battling to be as big a star as Steve Perry, but he's still a
Mm-hmm.
star. Then you got the real fans know that the drummer was named Steve Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people are like, "Oh, come on, I'll give you $100 if you know the bass player's name." And then somebody comes up, "Oh, it was Ross Valerie." Well, point being, if Ross Valerie was at Ralph's right now buying eggs, no one would recognize him.
Mm-hmm.
But Steve Perry would have to sign an autograph on his way out of the store because
Right.
somebody would recognize him and somebody would have listened to Don't Stop Believing on their way into the store that day.
True.
You know, so, you know, what's the difference between being in a rock band and being a rock star? Well, the difference is the difference between Ross Valerie and Steve Perry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's where
Right.
I'm at. So, like, again, that's a long way about saying that the Laws had at least one person who really thought he was a star, and everybody in
Mm-hmm.
America was going, "Yeah, I don't know. I heard that one song."
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right. So they do. So you guys do about 6 weeks together, the two bands.
yeah.
And from what it was fun to just look up parts of that tour tonight. From what I saw, there's a audio recording of Straightjacket Fits playing Club Lingerie. I don't think that was maybe part of the tour, but it says it was their last. It was the last U.S. date, and it was the last time that Andrew played with the band.
Oh
And
wow.
then the Laws had their. It was really their only American tour, and you said that they came back to do. The only thing I could find was that they opened up for Elvis Costello at Universal Amphitheater, where there several shows, and they did at a Tower Inn store. That's all I could find on
Yeah,
that.
right. So they did an in store and uh, Pacific Amphitheater
Mm-hmm.
and
It
Universal.
seems like a perfect fit.
Yeah, it was amazing. I
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the number one point of pride in my whole life to that point. Number one point of pride of all time up to that day was sitting there at the monitor desk while the Laws were playing, and I had a little cue wedge down by my feet that was kind of randomly pointed up at no one. And Elvis Costello walked up next to me and pointed at that wedge, and then he pointed to his ear. And so I put up a mix for just Elvis Costello to hear, and
Uh-huh.
he gave me one of these,
Uh-huh.
and so
Nice.
I had mixed Law's show just for Elvis Costello.
That's
So that was kind of the crowning point, the crowning moment of my life up till then. Yeah,
that's so
yeah,
great. And so it looks like after those shows, they might have played a couple shows in England and then disappeared. So
yeah,
those are like, it's interesting that you were involved in the last American hurrahs for both bands. Two of my favorites at the time. It's so
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah.
So when was the last time? So you got to hear those songs every night for a couple of months. When was the last time you think you listened to that record, the Lost record?
Uh,
Since
way
then,
way more than 20 years passed by. Yeah,
uh huh.
and then this year was the first time I put it on, and it's on iTunes with the lossless sound quality. So I've heard it out there a couple times since they
Mm-hmm.
did that. But the funny thing about the catalog that's available right now is that there's nothing that I could find on Apple Music that has John singing.
Mm.
But live, there was two songs John sang,
I know one.
Right. And so one of them was called All Right.
Yep.
And then he took that with him after they broke up, and it was the single for his band Cast.
Right.
So the funny thing about that tour was that my friend Brian and I would finish every night and pack the truck, and we'd both be singing All Right. Like All Right
Hmm.
was a bona fide earworm,
Yeah.
you know?
Interesting.
Yeah, and Lee never, from what I could tell, he had never complained that John had a hit song in his hands.
Hmm.
But I do find it weird that if you look at the Law's catalog online, it's like John was kind of an also ran with the band,
Hmm.
but live he was super super important.
Seems like his harmonies were really great, and I never really thought about it too much for a long time. But watching video clips of
Yeah,
them, I'm like, wow, he had such a really great sense of harmony.
yeah, yeah. It was exactly like, I mean, to me, it's like the whole thing is like, to me the same vibe as like Magic Bus by the Who, and
Mm.
Can't Explain too. It's like between Magic
Mm.
Bus and Can't Explain, to me it's like those are the pieces that can be reassembled into Law's songs.
Mm-hmm.
And John was really a big part of the backing vocal. Yeah.
Nice. So we are in the middle of ranking this whole album. What songs stick in your mind as either one that you probably never need to hear again, but you don't need to hear that, but if you don't want to, but what were some of your favorites after hearing them so many times and after all these years?
Um. Well, I think they always sound checked with "Son of a Gun," and
Mm-hmm.
I think their guitar tech learned that riff on his guitar
Mm.
and played it all the time. Let me double check. Yeah. Right. So "Son of a Gun," it's the lead track,
Yeah.
and they sound checked with that all the time, and their
Mm-hmm.
guitar tech played it all the time. So honestly, to this day, I'm still a little tired of that song.
Mm.
I
Uh-huh.
feel I feel like I've been playing that song at soundcheck myself forever.
Mm.
But like There She Goes is just, it's one of those songs that when you hear it, you kind of think, oh, this band must have $1 billion, and
Right.
they must have 100 songs this good. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, it's like I Can't Sleep is another one, but I put There She Goes on top, and I would probably put Feeling after that, because Feeling's a good one. That's a real toe
Yeah.
tapper. It's really upbeat.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just give one more little. Doldrum again. So again, no, Doldrum is a great song, but you got to listen to that song and just think about like 1965, The Who.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. I think that they're. I think that probably Freedom Song kind of didn't make it as far as they wanted it to. I think that he kind of thought of himself as a bit of a Bob Marley.
Mm.
So I'd probably have to put Freedom Song on the bottom of the list for them. I'm not going to rank the whole
Interesting.
thing in order, but I mean, There She Goes really is like, if you have one band who the only thing they did was kick a 99-yard field goal,
Mm-hmm.
that's the Laws.
Right.
You know. So
Excellent.
they were good. It was fun.
Well, I'm
It
glad
was.
that it came up. Of all the bands that I assumed that I would have you on someday when we get to Red Cross or Old 97s, I never would think that the Laws you'd be my expert witness. So I appreciate you taking some time to.
Yeah, I mean, you call me again on the next one. Name any band that was on my list. I could give you a more in-depth detail. But yeah, the Laws were amazing. It was an incredible time. I just I had a hard time, as did everyone that was involved with the music from Seattle and other places from 91 to 93, 94. From what I could tell, the people that use that grunge label were just people that needed a shortcut for journalists to say this is about a set of bands we're going to write about. And to think that it was a movement where people were intentionally making a music to fit into a genre, grunge was a stupid word to use for it.
Totally.
So so when the laws were taking off, there was that groundswell coming from Seattle that was gonna come and make such a splash that the whole movement that the laws brought for themselves was eclipsed and nearly irrelevant. But then after that, you had your Oasis and stuff. That there was a moment for Space Hog in there for a little
Mm-hmm.
while.
Mm-hmm.
But for people to say like, oh, hey, grunge is dead, we have this. Well, the bands from Seattle weren't looking to have music that fit into a temporary genre that was trendy for 2 years. That was never the point. The point was to have a good band that made good music and lasted. So the fact that there was something that people thought was a fad that got in the way of first, maybe it got in the way of the laws having the career they needed to have, or
I mean,
you
you can
know,
say the same for Redd Kross, because they were also another band that you knew very well, that was highly influenced by the Beatles,
yeah,
and but they sort of had more power in rock to be that they could open up for Stone Temple Pilots and maybe blow them off the stage every
yeah,
night. But the Laws, it was such a specific thing. Like, you keep saying 1965 Who, and that's totally it. Like,
yeah,
that's how many bands were doing that then? Not many.
yeah. And nobody got on stage with an electric guitar without a distortion pedal. It just
Right.
wasn't done, and that guy did
Mm.
it. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's
And the
awesome.
the drum kit that looked like it was from an antique store, that was really funny.
I
Yeah,
love it.
it was great. All right,
Too cool. All right, Mike Dalke, I'm gonna let you
all right,
go.
Adam. We'll see you
I will
later.
talk to you soon.
I hope you got some footage you could use.
Yeah, this is great, man. Thanks so much.